I tell you the truth of this, Carl, is I was sitting at home listening to Desert Island Discs and up you popped, and I didn't know about your work with the Fortune Centre all those years ago. So we'll come to dressage and Olympics and stuff like that, but that's a brilliant story. What were you doing? How old were you and who were you helping?
Well, I was actually living in Sark in the Channel Islands at the time, and a lady who had a holiday house over there called round to the school and said, look, does anybody, is anyone interested in a career with horses? And that was me. And so I came and met them for the interview. And they said, well, why don't you come to England and see it? And I said, well, where am I going? So she said, well, we run the Fortune Centre. And, you will be able to come there and get some qualifications for teaching to help with where I was going to go. And that's how I ended up going there. Worked alongside the students there, the residential students. Yeah. And so I had a little bit of a joint career while I was there, helping them with their riding and just really the rehabilitation that horses bring for so many people with disabilities. Yeah. So it was a really interesting start for me. And I think a lot of people thought that I was possibly part of the group, but in fact I was the same age as them, but I was there just helping and learning to ride at the same time.
Well, a fascinating story, and as we both know, because we both support riding with the disabled, that the magic and power of the horse to help people in need is just phenomenal. Equally, sponsors and owners are crucial in all top-level equestrian sport. You had an early entree with that, with the Bechtolsheimers, who great within the sport, but also have family members doing jolly well at the moment as well. Tell us how you got involved with them.
Yes, well, I had my career, I'd reached young riders. So young riders is for 18 to 21-year-olds. And I came to the end of my career there at 21. I actually made the European team at the age of 21. And a week before we were due to go to the European Championship, I broke my leg. So that put an end to going there. And I really wasn't sure where my career was going to go next. And one of our selectors of the young riders at the time called me and she said, look, there's a family in Gloucestershire called the Bechtolsheimers. They're very big into dressage. We think that you've got enough talent to go and do the job. They're looking for a British rider because they had a German rider at the time. Yeah. And the Germans were the leading nation in dressage for so many years and still are the ones to beat. And so I went for an interview and got the job there riding the horses. We had a stable of 18 horses, and I arrived in October 1989. And my career took off very quickly. The following June 1990, I made my first world championship. And I stayed with them then for 3.5 years and went on to do a Europeans, my first Olympics in Barcelona. And then moved on in 93. But while I was there, of course, their young daughter at the time, Laura, who was 4 years old, I used to help her with the ponies, and we didn't have I was certainly I think a bit of a ghastly older brother to her. I used to tease her a lot and give her horrible lessons to make sure she never rode again, and I didn't have to teach her after
worked
school
out all right
day.
For her, though. She's doing very, very nicely.
It did.
Penultimate question, and just to underline, so you started off doing great stuff for other people with the Fortune Centre, and then other people did great stuff for you and gave you a leg up, and the rest is history. Then along comes Valegro, and lo and behold, you do the same for someone who's become such a close and lovely friend, Charlotte Dujardin. Tell people briefly the Valegro story from a Hester point of view.
Well, I found Valegro when he was 2.5 years old. He was a very raw, unbroken horse, and we had no idea that he was going to turn into a superstar. But he was a very intelligent horse. So he came to live with me here back in England. And Charlotte had come to work for me. He was 5 years old at this stage, so very young, didn't know anything really. Charlotte came to work for me as a working pupil at that time. And I paired them together because at that time, being a professional rider, we weren't allowed to compete at the lower levels. Those were the rules of the sport at that time. And so I put them together, and they were together for 3 years. competing and being very successful. And this was before the level of Grand Prix, which we compete at the Olympic Games. And Charlotte told me herself when he was 8 years old, it was time for me to take over the reins and take him on. And Charlotte was very convinced that she wasn't giving him up. And I agreed to that because I also happened to have another fantastic horse at the time called Utopia. It's very unusual, of course, for a top rider to get more than one good horse, a great horse, should I say, in their lifetime. And I happened to have two at the same time. So it was only natural that I would leave Charlotte with him. And I enjoyed her enthusiasm. I enjoyed watching her ride him. I think it's probably one of the biggest questions I get asked is, was I jealous? Why didn't I ride him myself? And I had so much pleasure watching her ride him.
Yeah.
And I loved every minute of their journey, 6 years of medal. So it was worth it for me.